Okay. Just getting things set up here. All right, you'll have to. I'll have to apologize for any barking you hear in the background. I think one of my neighbors got a new dog. But here we are. Good evening, everybody. I am back with a little bit more Mathfinder, but hopefully this stream we will do a little more focus on design of the wizard here in a bit, as I think we're pretty close to fixing the damage calculations for the marshals here. I think we're really close. But let's see here. Yep, interesting. Yeah, alright. Just getting my bearings. Alright, so I think last time we realized that we had to integrate the runes, the property runes, into our calculations here. So, looking at, for example, the flaming rune. Is additional 1d6 fire damage on a successful strike and 1d10 on a critical hit. So, I need to adjust this damage to add in that extra averaged damage from the runes. Also in this damage here, I have added in the striking runes, and it looks like, yes, extra damage from ability scores. So, the first level that they apply at is level 8. So I need to change that first. Which, I guess the easiest way to do this is going to be make a new column here. And that way I can more easily adjust these formula here. So we're adding some fire damage here. And that, I believe, applies all the way up until level 10 when they get an additional rune that they can put on their weapon. So at level 10, they can throw any other 1d6 property rune on there. It doesn't really matter for our purposes. Could be lightning or cold or whatever else. But we just are going to add another 3.5 to our damage calculation here. And that will continue all the way until weapon potency plus 3, which is 16. So from 10 until 16, at which we get a final die to add. And that will just carry on with the rest. So now we can copy this and just paste it over. And let's delete these. Okay. That is looking better. I will need to do the same thing for the short bow, since the fighter and the ranger can use a composite longbow. The rogue only has the short bow here. They can use a composite short bow, I believe, but I was looking at more of a utility base comparison, but we can just take a look here. So once again, gonna do the same thing. Just copy this over. Whoops, actually I don't want to do that. I'm just going to overwrite this. Okay, So level 8, you have the plus 5 up until 10, at which we get the additional 5. That is up until level 16, where we get the final extra damage here. All right. Now we can copy this, paste the values only, this. All right. So that is looking better. I also had to adjust the critical hit stuff. Let's see here. Let me think. Whoops. So I can do this a similar thing here. I just copy the values only. And at level 8. So the critical hit is a bit more complicated. Because for the Flaming Rune, I'm assuming they're going to take the Flaming Rune first. They will deal the double damage of the 1d6 plus the 1d10. So it will be equal to actually, it might be easier to do it like this. Yeah. So take this damage and 8. You'll add the 5.5 average damage from the 1d10, the Flaming Rune, plus the 3.5. Wait. I already have the 3.5 calculated in the base damage here, because this is based off of this damage here. So we already have the 3.5 added in, which is fine. And then this extra 5.5 is from the deadly die of the bow, which I believe, yep, I have it scale up properly. So I just need to take into account the persistent damage, which, if I want to be very generous or very like low ball to make sure things are balanced properly, I could just have it be an additional 1d10 fire damage. If I wanted to be a little more honest, I should multiply that by 1.7, which is basically I'm acting like I'm expecting a combat to be around 2 rounds for the creature that you're attacking. Yeah. Some people round it to like 2 for the persistent damage. If you do like the full math of persistent damage, it's supposedly, if combat were to go on forever, would give you an expected like 3 1/3 multiplier to your whatever persistent damage you're dealing. Most people round it off to 2 though, because you want to truncate it due to the number of rounds that you'll realistically run into in combat in Pathfinder. So we'll stick with 1.7 for a more modest estimation. So this pretty much remains the same all the way up until you upgrade your Flaming Rune, which is at level 15. So we can go all the way down here, at which it's 2d10, which averages out to 11. So now we can take this, copy it, and paste it over the values. Get rid of these. Okay. So we got that going on. Let's get to the shortbow crit. Similarly, I can just this, go all the way down, and add in the 5 times 0.7. Go to level 15. Goes up to 11. Okay. Right. Okay, now we look at the charts here. And wow, would you look at that? Our Runecaster is very nicely underneath the other damage curves here. Of course, that we see the attack roll technique is underneath the save, which makes sense typically for our techniques here. And then our technique is underneath even just a one action attack, or like our first attack of the round for everything else, which matches up with expectations within Pathfinder. If we look at the overall damage per round, I'm basically assuming each of these classes is performing 2 attacks, because oftentimes they have some other utility action that they have to perform, or just have to move. And then the Runecaster is full blasting. They're using their save technique as well as their one action attack roll technique, and because of that, you're spending a lot more action just raw attacking. But it looks like even with that accounted for, everything looks pretty good. They get a little close to the rogue at the end here, but that's okay. The rogue isn't even fully optimized. They're not using a composite longbow or a short bow. Yeah, and things look pretty nice here. Yeah, so whatever scaling that I have here looks like it's just 1d4 on both. Appears to be fitting quite nicely. I don't have any current complaints about how things look right now. So I think that means we can sort of move on to looking at more raw narrative design of runecasting, which is looking at the classes. We'll keep this in mind. I may have to adjust some things later, but this makes me very happy to see that we are well below the expected damage for ranged stuff. Maybe at some point I will look at a good attack roll spell or a good damaging spell and see how it compares to runecasting. Yeah, that'll be probably the final bit of analysis if it's needed. All right. So in that case, we can get looking at Runecasting Wizard and Runecasting in general. So I haven't done a full stream of sorts where I've just gone over Runecasting in general. So we can do that now as we start to move into the wizard. So Runecasting is made up of a whole bunch of different runes that will each have their own set of techniques. You can look at the list of the runes right here. This document isn't final in the way that it's describing things. This has been a bit of flow of consciousness. It's quite long. But we can take a look here. So there's cold, combustion, destruction, creation, flesh, mind, enhance, reach, electricity, earth, light, sense, gravity, time, and void. I believe that adds up to 15. And within those 15 runes, they have some sort of theme attached to them. And have a series of techniques attached to that theme. Of course, when this is fully released, I'm going to give some basic guidelines to GM saying, hey, the system is meant to be flexible for your players. Please make some room for them to make up their own techniques if possible. There's plenty of techniques made that I'm calling the discovered techniques in the lore of this magic system that you can base other techniques off of. Because this is supposed to be a bit more personal than, say, spellcasting. Because spellcasting in Pathfinder is basically, oh, you're a wizard in the modern day, just kind of borrowing the knowledge of all of the spellcasters that have come before you to try to find and discover these spells. And you're just kind of borrowing that knowledge, not necessarily coming up with it on your own. So yeah, techniques are the equivalent of spells, but they work very differently. As I've mentioned this in other places that I've talked about runecasting, runecasting is resourceless. There's no slots, there's no points, there's none of that. It is going to be intended that everything in this system will be as resourceless as possible. There may be one or two casters that still have to use a point system. I'm thinking of Psychic, maybe Oracle as well, but that is to be discussed when I get to them. Those will be much later in the design cycle due to their complexity. But yeah, for the most part, all resourceless. Getting rid of spell slots and charts and whatever else. And we're replacing that with rune casting checks, where essentially you want to cast, or what I'm calling the activity enact a technique. You have to roll a skill check to see how well you're going to perform that technique. And that's just against a standard DC for your level. The skill involved in order to perform the techniques, what rune casting check you'll make, is determined by the rune that you're trying to use. There's a pair of skills for each. And that way it's a little bit flexible, and you can kind of change how maybe your magic looks, how you cast. And yeah, there's also room for a certain lore skill to maybe make their way in. So you have lore of stone cutting or something like that. That could probably be used for earth. So there's a little wiggle room, but not too much. It's mainly if you want to use a lore skill, you can, but these are the skills that I'm intending to be used with these runes. So you make the rune casting check. If you do really good on it, you actually increase the output of your magic, which you evolve the technique by 2 levels. And evolving is the new heightening system. But instead of there being spell levels I never really was a fan of spell levels. The term's confusing and it just obfuscates things. So techniques are based on your character level. And you can evolve those techniques in a similar fashion that you can heighten techniques. Like if we go down to, say, Makeshift Blocker, evolve +4 just means that at level 1, you'll have this technique and you can enact it however you so please. But at level 5, because 1 + 4 is 5, you'll be able to use this first degree of the evolution. I really like this because it gives you a little more fine-tuning to the scaling of certain techniques. So yeah. After that, counteracting is going to be slightly different with runecasting. It's going to be a bit more common, not as common as you would say counterspell is. Howdy, how's it going? But there's definitely a little bit of a dissatisfaction, I feel, in Pathfinder with counterspelling. It was rampant in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. However, Pathfinder 2nd edition, due to the spells not being so overpowering in encounters, counterspelling didn't need to be as prevalent, so they tuned back the capabilities of counterspelling as well. Runecasting, you don't have to worry about resources, so it's more like action trading. So I'm going to bring back a little bit of the sort of counterspelling play into runecasting. Not by much. It's not going to be like counterspell. But essentially you have in regular Pathfinder 2nd edition, you can counterspell normally with like the same exact spell, very specific, or occasionally you can counter with these sort of opposing spells, like some light spells will dispel magical darkness, and magical darkness can counteract light spells and so forth. I'm making it a bit more broader than that, where the runes themselves are opposing each other. So any cold rune can attempt to counteract any combustion rune technique, and vice versa. And the same goes for all the other pairs, with the exception of Void. Void is made to be the sort of anti-magic rune. And that will be able to counteract any sort of rune casting magic. However, all those counteracting checks using the Void rune will be made at a -2 circumstance penalty, so it'll be a bit harder. A question might be, though, how does rune casting and spell casting interact with each other with this counteracting system? Because rune casting is resourceless, it would be really rough if they could just like constantly try to counteract spells all the time, making somebody expend their resources for no resources. That would suck. So rune casting, whenever you attempt to counteract with rune casting against spell casting, your counteract level will be treated as 1 less. So it's going to be much harder for you to counteract a spell of your level or even slightly below your level. And then spell casting, when they're counteracting a rune casting effect, they treat their counteract level as 1 higher. So it's very easy for them to stop a rune casting effect that's going on if they're going to spend a spell slot to get rid of it. So you got basically a guaranteed 1-for-1 there. Yeah. Moving on, the magic traditions. I contemplated just removing the traditions, but I think there is some value in it. So basically, the magic traditions will give you a slight specialization in which runes you are better at. Any caster can access any rune, period. But if you are an arcane caster, you will get a circumstance bonus to that rune casting check to see how well you perform the technique, to a set of 6 runes, and each tradition gets 6 runes of their own. This list might change as like I playtest things and look at things, and if you were very perceptive, I think, yeah, some of these runes are exclusive to a single tradition, and then some just poach a lot from others. Like Arcane shares most of its list with the other traditions. They just have a lot of like generalist runes to use, though. While something like Divine is much more specialized with the runes that it has. However, it has a lot of unique runes to it that they're good at. Of course, you can choose any rune that you want, but it'll be helpful to your runecasting checks if you choose to take on the runes that are favored by your magical tradition. Okay, so enacting a technique is very similar to a spell. There will be tiers of the techniques. I've only written a set of basic techniques for all the runes so far. There will be a major, or a greater and a major version, or technique versions of for all the runes. So take a look at some of the cold basic techniques here. The goal of these is that they're very simple effects for the most part, very straightforward to sort of embody the name basic. So now I can start going through and probably adjusting the damages here, now that I know that I'm liking the 1d4 damage scaling on all these effects. But as you can see, we have a saving throw damaging technique here. That's 2 actions. And then our attack roll technique is 1 action. And that's going to be consistent throughout. Attack roll techniques will be better on action economy at the expense of lower average damage. Then we got some cute status effect techniques, or just cute little utility things like snuff. There's some effects that I wish were more prevalent in Pathfinder, like just the ability to just put out a fire, a non-magical fire, early on. Feels like a magical effect that should be there, but I think you don't get a spell until 2nd level spells, like Quench, I think it's called. But with this, I can sort of more finely control these sort of at-will effects. Hoarfrost is basically a reflavored, scalable grease. Because I just love the grease spell. But it's ice flavored. And we can just sort of slowly scroll through these. There's quite a few techniques in here. I try to give 3 to 5 to every rune, with the exception of Enhance, Reach, and Void, because those are very specialized. The, I guess, maybe slightly controversial one, I would imagine, is Focus. It's a technique from Enhance. This is going to be your new Bless, Heroism, Guidance, etc., kind of all rolled into a single one technique. This is where your status bonus is going to come from, and you'll notice that most of these techniques have a very limited duration compared to their spell counterparts. And if you were to fail the runecasting check for this technique, you don't just lose the technique outright. That would suck. You get a reduced effect. So in the case of this technique, you would cut the duration in half. So you would only get the bonus for 2 rounds. That might get nerfed down to 2 rounds total, and then when you fail, you only get it for 1 round. But that's to be determined. And then the bonus kind of scales up. I also think that heroism is a little overstated, I guess. It's just quite generally good. So I also gave this a forced decision. We had to pick defense with the saving throws, attack rolls for offense, or utility with the skill checks. I think that's a nice fit. We have Embiggen, which is kind of like enlarge. Stitch is the new heal of Runecasting. This is pretty much the only healing technique made so far. There will be others. But yeah, this is your bread and butter healing technique. Which people might think that it's horrible that wizards can grab the flesh rune and be able to heal. But I want to give people as much flexibility as possible in building their spellcaster. So, yeah, I think that's enough to show off for now. One day I'll do a long stream in the nitty-gritty details of why I chose which techniques to write and stuff. But for today, we work on arcane theses for wizard. So to give a quick review from last time, not too much has to change with the wizard when you revoke spellcasting. Of course, I have to change the arcane spellcasting to runecasting. And so they will gain 3 basic runes. So they will get to pick 3 runes out of this list, and they have access to all of the techniques within that rune. So you're definitely going to be starting out with more spells than you would as a level 1 wizard. However, the speed at which you scale your spell repertoire is slightly slower. But yeah, you'll start with 3 basic runes, and then you have this temporary rune that you prepare at the beginning of each day. This will be what contrasts them with spontaneous casters, where they will not have any temporary runes that they can pick at the start of each day. They will just have their runes, but they will all scale up to major, while the prepared casters will get more basic runes and maybe even more greater runes depending on like their subclass and such, but they will not have as many major runes compared to a spontaneous spellcaster because they're not as specialized. So they use their same DC. They're going to have their same proficiency scaling. Evolving techniques is the difference to heightening techniques. We discussed that. Then rune script is the wizard spellbook. And then instead of drain bond, we have release bond, which allows you to re-roll that rune casting skill check, which covers most of the stuff for wizards, except for arcane schools, which, since there's no schools in rune casting, there's not much I can do for that. They already have more techniques starting out, and they also they don't have resources, so they don't need a focus spell to sort of bridge the gap with their utility or damage or whatever. So there's much less of a need to have the arcane school. However, the arcane thesis is important, and that is what I'm going to work on today. So I'd already thought of a couple. Maybe people in chat can give their opinions on this. The wizard is how many theses? The improved familiar attunement doesn't have to change at all. The metamagic experimentation, spell blending, spell substitution, staff nexus, all will have to be totally reworked or reimagined, however. I already had an idea for spell substitution, which is what I will write out right now. Since I had some free time, I rewrote some stuff. I can spell for sure. All right. How is everybody doing today? Hope everybody's doing all right. Okay. So that's the first thesis idea I had. Spell substitution is all about being as flexible as possible. And so Runic Expert will sort of embody that flexibility in a different reimagined way, where you give up one of your permanent basic runes and make it a temporary basic rune, giving you much more flexibility. But and also as a 10-minute activity, you may swap out one of your temporary runes with a rune of the same tier. And of course, as the wizard will scale up in levels, they will gain more temporary runes. That's how they will scale nicely. Yeah. That was my idea of a flexibility buff subclass for the wizard runecaster. The second one is sort of a combination of the metamagic experimenter and staff nexus. That would be a cool whoops. That would actually be a cool hi James. That would actually be a cool thing to do for spellcasting, I think for sure. Is instead of it giving like a item bonus to like some skill or whatever, meta magic containing staff would probably be really neat. That makes staves really give a punch as opposed to just like a spell battery. A slightly better wand. Studied. Oh, it contains. There you go. Good job, buddy. Yes, wands you can overcharge. Wands are fantastic. The only amazing thing that staves usually have over wands is like the fact that you can cast a really low level spell over and over again. Hello. Greetings. Uh that could be the case, yes. That could easily be the case where um let me finish Staff Carver and I'll explain myself. Actually, I just realized something. I need to look up traits. Is there a... There's a fusion trait, isn't there? Oh, there's not a fusion trait. Yeah, transpositional cast. I actually have a feat for transpositional casting in Tarot Master. I like the idea, and I just threw it in there. But essentially, the next step. Okay, there's combination. I knew I couldn't use combination, but no fusion trait. Okay. I will have to figure out a new name for this, but fusion trait will be the placeholder for now. The next step to developing runecasting is taking these runes and making combined techniques out of them. So you might have a technique of cold and combustion that makes steam. You might have something like reach is essentially very similar to a meta magic where you can apply the reach rune to a technique and it allows you to extend the range of your technique in some manner. Maybe light and mind to allow you to make some fancy illusion technique. That is the next step of runecasting that I'm going to develop, is these combined techniques that take the themes from two runes, put them together, and get a more powerful technique. And that is how you will build your technique list across the levels instead of the big jumps that you'll get at level 7 and 15 and 19. When you get your increases in proficiency and also you get more runes and increase your tier of your runes. So this is the granular increase in your technique repertoire. Now, what is the trait for those? I still have to figure out. Might be fusion for now, but that probably needs to change because conflicts would have been cool. Fusion does sound like an inventor or alchemist trait. Yes, fusion is technically free. It's just in a rough spot because there's critical fusion already, and it would be kind of weird to poach half of a trait name. Yeah, I'm not sure what the name of this like fused. I could call it fused, but it's still teetering on robbing from another trait. Maybe we just look up synonyms for fused. A synthesis? There isn't a synthesis trait. Synthesis isn't bad. I don't know what you guys think, but I might stick with synthesis for now. That sounds vaguely familiar, like a summoner ability might have to do with synthesis, but there's no trait for it, so. Alright, so back to what I was saying to answer ellipsis +1. So you could technically do that. I could have it where if you have access, I could have a feat where if you have access to the reach rune and maybe like the mind rune or the sense rune, something else. You can add an additional action to the technique. The technique gains the synthesis trait, and it allows you to originate the technique from a spot that isn't the caster for better angles. That is totally something that I can probably do and throw in there. But yeah, this is what the Staff Carver is going to be. It's going to be a combination of Staff Nexus and Metamagic Experimenter, to where you're gaining additional feats while also having a staff. And staves in runecasting are going to be essentially containers of free synthesis techniques. To where if you have access to the runes required by the synthesis techniques, you'll be able to enact those techniques out of the staff. Similar to how if a spell is on your spell list in a staff, you can launch the spell out of the staff. That is the goal for staffs. Wands are going to be kind of a potency rune for runecasters, to where they give a item bonus to your rune casting check, not your attack roll or DC, but your rune casting check. And they'll also have like very mild effects for certain unique wands, similar to unique wands for spellcasters. So yeah, that's the goal for wands and staves. I believe. How was Metamagic Experimenter worded? Starting at 4th level during your daily preparations, you can gain a magic wood. Okay. Yeah, we can just copy that. Wait. It has a level requirement of... Okay. It's a level requirement of no more than half your level. Okay. Sorry, for level... All right. So... Spelling is hard. Okay. Yeah, that's Staff Carver. I think this covers quite a bit of the arcane theses, and of course, there's the familiar one. The familiar one doesn't need to change. Now, what to do about spell blending? Spell blending is more of like a upward, like thinning focus of wizard, where you're kind of taking your flexibility and kind of narrowing it upward towards your higher level spells. That sort of vertical conversion I'm not really wanting for rune casting, for prepared rune casters specifically. So trying to keep in the spirit of spell blending, but also making sure I'm staying faithful to the prepared casters that I want to make is going to be difficult. Yeah, this is a tricky one for sure. Because I could basically take away their temporary rune and have them only have 3 basic runes to start, but allow them to gain more access or greater access to greater and major runes later on. So my plan was to basically have them upgrade 1 or 2 of their original permanent runes up through the greater and major tree of sorts. And from there, I guess I could cut down the rune access and basically no longer gain temporary runes, but all 3 of their original starting runes goes up to major. That doesn't sound very fun and great, because it's supposed to be reserved for spontaneous casters, and then that feels kind of flavorless. It's possible that spell blending just can't be faithfully recreated, and I just need to make my own new subclass, which is fun. This give me a thought. If so, we have Runic Expert, which expands horizontal power. Staff Carver is also horizontal power in a way. What's another embodiment of flexibility? Though I want to make a counter spelling subclass. To expand their capabilities of using the feat that I'm going to make for counter spelling called Counter Tech. That could be an idea, but I probably need to write Counter Tech first. We will just note counter subclass. Yeah, it's difficult. Well, with that out of the way, we will move on to feats. So if I were to look at the wizard, look at the feats that will remain for wizard. Counterspell's gone. Eschew materials is gone. Hand of the Apprentice gone. Reach spell gone. Spellbook Prodigy gone. And Widen spell is also gone. The only one that remains a level 1 is Familiar. I'm gonna have to write a lot of synthesis techniques. Cantrip expansion's gone, so it's Conceal spell. Energy Ablation will probably be a synthesis technique. Enhanced Familiar can stay. Non-lethal spell will go. The spell weapon can probably just be like mildly reworked. Call bonded item can be mildly reworked. I honestly don't even know what Irizoku Tattoo is. It's for focus points. That's gone. Linked Focus, that's gone. Silent Spell, gone. Undying Conviction. That could technically stay, I guess. My bonded pinky. Oh. I'm not sure what you're trying to reference there. But there's some not so savory potentials there. Farm retention. If I make a polymorph technique, farm retention can also stay. Okay. It was funny. Yes, binky like pacifier. That's good. I hope it stays in the mouth and not other places. Universal versatility. It's just the zoop sound there. It just made me think that's where that was going. Maybe I just have a dirty mind. Universal versatility. Yeah, I'm going through here, and most of these are just gone. Reflect spell can probably just be a new version under counterattack. Teleport sound. Yep, that's better. Call bonded item can definitely stay. Yeah, I have my work cut out for me. Thankfully, wizards don't have too many feats. But the other class that I plan on doing before I kind of send this out to playtest is Sorcerer. Plan on basically planning out Wizard and Sorcerer up to level 7, where they get their expert spellcasting and also their greater techniques. Yeah. What's missing? A wizard capstone feat that makes you a werewolf. That's a weird capstone feat. I would think. I would hope you get it. Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that being in 1E. 1E was silly at times. But yeah, goal is to get these classes made up to level 7, then let people mess around with them, give their inputs, see how people feel about runecasting in general through the early levels, and then go from there. Yeah, that sounds about right. And I imagine the werewolf gave them a bunch of resistances and healing and stuff. But it's been forever since I've looked at 1E stuff. Actual ages. Yeah, that sounds about right. Sounds about on par. Okay. Well, you're a little bit past the hour here. I do have to make some banana muffins. I promised I would do that, and I have some very ripe bananas that if they get any riper, I will have to consider throwing them out, and I don't want to do that. So I might go ahead and leave you guys and just go make some nice banana muffins. Zoop. So yeah, I hope people are excited to see this take shape. Now that the damage numbers are kind of solidified, and I've managed to make sure that the Runecaster is indeed below ranged attackers. Everything looks set. I'm actually considering maybe I could potentially buff the damage slightly. Maybe give the saves or one of the attack roll techniques a 1d6. But I will probably do that on my own time and toy around with that. And then once the techniques are finalized for playtest, I will allow people to, or I'll maybe show this chart again. Because there's some parts where they are just pretty low in the damage department. Because this red line here is a short bow using rogue, which is definitely not optimal. So I do have to consider maybe there being a consideration of a buff here. Just worried about the early game levels. They're pretty close at some points. And then late game, they're also very close. It'll be interesting toying around for it. Yeah. I hope everybody has a good day and or evening, wherever you are. And yeah, I think I'm gonna go make some banana muffins. So I will see you guys later. And until next week. Bye-bye.